The massive alien ships appeared over Earth like dark clouds blocking out the sun. There were 12 of them, each one bigger than any city humanity had ever built. Their black metal hulls gleamed with strange lights that pulsed like a heartbeat. People around the world stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky in wonder and fear. Admiral Zexithara stood on the bridge of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. His 4 arms moved across control panels while his 6 eyes studied the blue planet below. He had done this same routine on over 300 worlds. Most species surrendered immediately when they saw the size of his fleet. The smart ones begged for mercy. The foolish ones tried to fight and were quickly crushed. "Send the standard message," he commanded his communications officer. His voice made a clicking sound that his translator turned into words humans could understand. Down on Earth, every television, radio, and computer screen suddenly showed the same image. A tall, insect-like creature with gleaming black armor stood before them. When he spoke, his voice was cold and emotionless. "People of Earth, I am Admiral Zexithara of the Galactic Hegemony. Your world has been selected for integration into our empire. You have 72 hours to surrender your governments and military forces. Submit peacefully and your species will be allowed to continue existing as productive members of our civilization. Resist, and your planet will be cleansed of all life. This is the only warning you will receive." The transmission ended, leaving billions of humans staring at blank screens. In the emergency meeting room deep beneath the United Nations building in New York, world leaders gathered around a large table. Presidents, prime ministers, and generals from every major nation sat in stunned silence. The room felt heavy with fear and uncertainty. Dr. Sarah Chen, Earth's chief xenodiplomat, was the first to speak. She was a small woman with gray hair and kind eyes, but her voice was steady and strong. "We knew this day might come. We've been preparing for first contact scenarios for decades. The question now is how we respond." President Williams of the United States leaned forward. "Can we fight them? What do our military advisors say?" General Morrison, the head of the Joint Military Council, shook his head. "Our best weapons are like throwing rocks at a tank. Their ships are the size of mountains. Even our nuclear arsenal would barely scratch their hulls." "So we surrender?" asked Prime Minister Nakamura of Japan. "We become slaves to these creatures?" Dr. Chen stood up, slowly. She had spent her entire career studying the possibility of alien contact. She had read every report, every theory, every piece of speculation about what humanity should do if this moment came. Now that it was here, she felt strangely calm. "No," she said simply. "We don't surrender." The room erupted in arguments. Some leaders demanded to know what choice they had. Others wanted to negotiate. A few suggested immediate surrender to save lives. Dr. Chen raised her hand for silence. "Let me tell you something about humanity that these aliens don't understand. We've been fighting for our survival since we lived in caves. We've faced ice ages, plagues, wars, and disasters that should have wiped us out. Each time we found a way to survive. Not because we were the strongest or the fastest, but because we refused to give up." She walked to the window and looked up at the alien ships hanging in the sky like deadly ornaments. "They think we're just another primitive species they can easily conquer. They don't know about Project Fortress. They don't know what we've been building in secret for the past 50 years. They see our planet and think they understand us. They're wrong." General Morrison frowned. "Project Fortress is still experimental. We don't even know if it will work." "Then we're about to find out," Dr. Chen replied. "Because I'd rather die free than live as a slave." The vote was close, but humanity chose defiance. 12 hours later, Dr. Chen stood before a bank of cameras in the same UN building. She wore a simple blue suit and had pinned a small Earth flag to her lapel. Her message would be broadcast to every human on the planet and transmitted directly to the alien fleet. Above, "Admiral Zexithara," she began, looking directly into the camera. "My name is Dr. Sarah Chen, and I speak for all of humanity. We have received your ultimatum and discussed it carefully. Our answer is no." Up on his ship, Admiral Zexithara's 6 eyes widened in surprise. "In 3 centuries of conquest, No species had ever simply refused his offer. They always tried to negotiate or beg for better terms. Dr. Chen continued speaking. We understand that you have conquered many worlds. We understand that your technology is more advanced than ours. We understand that you believe resistance is futile. You are welcome to believe these things. However, you are not welcome on our planet or in our solar system. The alien admiral made a sound like grinding metal. Impossible. This species cannot seriously believe they can resist the might of the hegemony. We choose isolation over subjugation, Dr. Chen said calmly. We choose freedom over slavery. We choose to fight rather than kneel. If that means we stand alone in the universe, then we stand alone. Earth's doors are closed to you, Admiral. Find somewhere else to expand your empire. The transmission ended. Admiral Zexithara stared at the blank screen for several minutes. His officers waited nervously for his response. Finally, he turned to his weapons officer. Begin orbital bombardment. Target their major cities first. Make an example of them. Yes, Admiral, the weapons officer replied. Charging primary cannons now. Down on Earth, alarms began sounding in military bases around the world. Radar operators watched as the alien ships moved into attack formation. In the secret bunkers of Project Fortress, scientists and engineers worked frantically at their controls. Dr. Chen stood in the main control room, 3 miles beneath the Rocky Mountains. Banks of computers hummed around her, displaying readings and calculations that only a few people on Earth could understand. At the center of the room stood a single red button behind a clear protective cover. All stations report ready, announced Dr. Janet Rodriguez, the project's chief engineer. The quantum field generators are at full power. Dimensional anchors are stable. We're as ready as we'll ever be. Dr. Chen looked around the room at the faces of the men and women who had worked in secret for decades to reach this moment. They had built something the galaxy had never seen before. Something that challenged the basic laws of physics as most species understood them. She lifted the protective cover and placed her hand on the red button. For Earth, she said quietly, and pressed it. Above the planet, Admiral Zexithara watched, his weapons charged to full power. The energy cannons that had destroyed countless worlds were ready to fire. He opened his mouth to give the order that would end human civilization. The words never came. Something was happening around the Earth. The space around the planet began to shimmer like water. A barrier of pure energy was forming, growing stronger. By the second, it wrapped around the entire world like a protective shell. What is that? Zexithara demanded. His science officer's voice was filled with confusion. Unknown, Admiral. Our sensors cannot identify the energy signature. It appears to be some form of localized space-time distortion. Can we penetrate it? Unknown, sir. Admiral. Zexithara felt something he had not experienced in centuries. Uncertainty. These humans had created something his scientists could not even identify, let alone understand. Fire, he ordered. All weapons, maximum power. The alien fleet opened fire on the tiny blue planet that had dared to say no. The first energy beam from the alien flagship struck Earth's new barrier with the force of a collapsing star. The beam was designed to punch through planetary shields and boil oceans. It had cracked moons and turned asteroids into dust. Admiral, Zexithara expected to see the human barrier shatter like glass. Instead, something impossible happened. The barrier absorbed the massive energy beam completely. For a moment, the shimmering field around Earth glowed brighter, as if the alien attack was feeding it power. Then, without warning, the barrier released all that energy back at the alien fleet. The returned beam struck the Eternal Dominion with twice the force it had carried originally. The massive alien ship, built to withstand the gravitational pull of black holes, crumpled like paper. Its hull split open, spilling atmosphere and debris into space. Half the ship simply vanished, reduced to atoms in an instant. Captain Marcus Rodriguez watched from Luna Base, humanity's secret military facility on the moon. He had been stationed there for 5 years, waiting for this exact moment. Through the observation dome, he could see the alien fleet hanging in space like angry wasps around Earth's glowing barrier. Did you see that? asked Lieutenant Chen, his communications officer. She was Dr. Sarah Chen's daughter, though few people knew about their family connection. Their own weapon just destroyed their flagship. Marcus nodded, hardly believing what he had witnessed. The barrier didn't just block their attack, it sent it back stronger than before. On the remaining alien ships, chaos erupted. Admiral Zexathera had been aboard the Eternal Dominion when it was destroyed. The surviving ships now fell under the command of Admiral Vextar, a younger officer who had never seen his forces defeated. "What happened to the flagship?" he demanded. His science officer was frantically checking readings on multiple screens. "The energy beam was somehow reflected back at us, Admiral. But that's impossible. No known technology can reverse the polarity of a coherent energy stream while amplifying its power. Then how did these primitives do it?" Vextar's voice carried a note of fear that his crew had never heard before. The science officer's mandibles clicked nervously. "Unknown, sir. Our computers cannot even identify what type of energy field they're using. It appears to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously." Down on Earth, Dr. Chen stood in the Project Fortress control room, watching displays that showed the barrier's status. The massive field surrounding the planet was stable and growing stronger by the minute. More importantly, it was learning. "The quantum processors are analyzing their weapon signatures," reported Dr. Rodriguez, the chief engineer. "Each attack they make teaches the barrier how to defend against that specific type of energy." Dr. Chen allowed herself a small smile. 50 years of preparation. 50 years of humanity's best minds working in secret, and it's actually working. Project Fortress had begun during the Cold War, when scientists realized that humanity's greatest weakness was also its greatest strength. Unlike other species that developed along predictable technological paths, humans had always approached problems from unexpected angles. While most galactic civilizations focused on bigger weapons and stronger armor, humanity had decided to study the fundamental nature of reality itself. The barrier wasn't just a shield. It was a living system that existed partially outside normal space-time. Every attack made it smarter, every assault made it stronger. The aliens were trying to break down a wall by throwing rocks at it, not realizing that each rock was being added to the wall's foundation. Admiral Vextar ordered another attack. 6 ships fired simultaneously, their combined energy output enough to shatter a small planet. The barrier absorbed every joule of power and reflected it back as 6 separate beams, each one perfectly targeted at the ship that had fired it. 2 more alien vessels exploded instantly. The other 4 managed to raise their emergency shields, but the reflected energy was so powerful that it overloaded their defensive systems. One ship lost all power and began drifting helplessly. Another caught fire as its hull plating melted under the intense heat. "Retreat!" Vextar screamed. "All ships retreat to minimum safe distance." The surviving alien vessels fled beyond the orbit of Mars, their crews terrified and confused. They had expected an easy conquest of a primitive world. Instead, they had lost over half their fleet to their own weapons. From Luna Base, Captain Rodriguez opened a secure communication channel. "To Earth. Control, this is Luna Base. The alien fleet has withdrawn to Mars orbit. Barrier is holding steady. No damage to Earth or Moon installations." Dr. Chen's voice came through clearly despite the massive energy field surrounding them. "Understood, Luna Base. Maintain observation protocols. This is just the beginning." She was right. Within hours, emergency signals were racing across the galaxy at faster than light speeds. The news was impossible to believe. A primitive species had not only resisted the hegemony, but had actually defeated them in battle. On the hegemony capital world of Zenthra Prime, the High Command gathered in emergency session. The great chamber filled with representatives from dozens of conquered species, all of them struggling to understand what had happened at Earth. Supreme Commander Torgeth, a massive creature with scales like black metal, studied the battle reports with growing disbelief. "Our ships were destroyed by their own weapons?" "Yes, Supreme Commander," replied the intelligence officer who had brought the news. "The human defensive system appears to redirect energy attacks back at their source with amplified power." "How is this possible?" Our scientists assure us that such technology violates the fundamental laws of physics. The intelligence officers' tentacles writhed nervously. Perhaps the humans understand physics differently than we do, sir. This comment sent ripples of unease through the chamber. The hegemony's power was based on technological superiority. They conquered worlds by demonstrating that resistance was futile, that their science was so advanced that rebellion was impossible. If a supposedly primitive species could create weapons beyond hegemony understanding, what did that mean for the Empire's future? Back at Earth, the barrier continued to strengthen. The quantum field generators deep beneath the planet's surface hummed with power drawn from sources the aliens couldn't detect. Humanity had learned to tap into the zero-point energy that existed in the vacuum of space itself. They had found ways to anchor their technology in parallel dimensions, where the normal rules of physics worked differently. Dr. Chen stood on the observation deck of the Fortress Control Center, looking up at the night sky through the barrier's shimmering energy field. The stars looked different now, filtered through humanity's protective shell. Some people called it beautiful. Others found it terrifying. She knew that beyond those stars, the galaxy was taking notice of what humanity had accomplished. Other species that had been conquered by the hegemony were probably wondering if rebellion was possible. The Empire's agents were certainly working to understand how Earth's defenses functioned. Dr. Chen? Lieutenant Martinez, her aide, approached carefully. We're receiving multiple communication attempts from various alien governments. They want to establish contact. Block them all, Dr. Chen replied firmly. Earth's doors are closed. Remember, we choose isolation. What about the hegemony fleet at Mars? They're maintaining position but not attacking. Dr. Chen smiled grimly. Let them watch. Let them try to understand what they're seeing. Every day they spend trying to figure out our barrier is another day they're not conquering someone else. As if responding to her words, the barrier pulsed with renewed energy. The quantum field fluctuated in patterns that looked almost like breathing. Humanity had created something alive, something that grew stronger with each passing moment. On Mars' orbit, Admiral Vextar stared at Earth's glowing barrier and tried to comprehend what his species was facing. These humans had built a defense system that treated the Empire's most powerful weapons like mosquito bites. They had turned the hegemony's own strength against itself. For the first time in galactic history, an entire species had looked at the mighty hegemony and said a simple word: no. The word was spreading across the galaxy faster than light, carried by traitors and diplomats and spies. Other worlds were starting to whisper it in their own languages. The empire that had seemed unstoppable was suddenly facing something it had never encountered before, a species that could not be conquered. Earth hung in space like a glowing jewel, wrapped in its impossible barrier, doors firmly closed to the galaxy that had tried to claim it. 6 months after the first failed attack, the greatest armada in galactic history assembled at the edge of Earth's solar system. 10,000 ships stretched across space, like a metallic constellation. Battle cruisers the size of cities, carriers that could deploy entire armies, weapons platforms designed to crack planets open like eggs. Supreme Commander Torgeth had come personally to oversee the siege. His command ship, the Inevitable Conquest, was a mobile fortress that had never been defeated in battle. Standing on his bridge, surrounded by the best military minds the hegemony had produced, he felt confident that this primitive human barrier would finally fall. Begin Phase 1 bombardment, he ordered. 1,000 ships opened fire simultaneously. The space around Earth lit up like a new star as energy beams, plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes, and gravity weapons all struck the barrier at once. The attack continued for 6 hours straight, pouring enough destructive power into the field to turn a moon into vapor. When the bombardment ended, the barrier was not only intact, but noticeably brighter than before. Status report, Torgeth demanded, his voice tight with frustration. The barrier has absorbed all energy from our weapons, reported his science officer, a creature whose multiple brains had been enhanced with cybernetic implants. Current field. Strength is approximately 40% higher than when we began the attack. 40% higher? You mean we made it stronger? That appears to be correct, Supreme Commander. Torgeth's claws scraped against his command chair. For 300 years, the hegemony had conquered worlds through superior firepower. Their weapons could reshape continents and boil atmospheres. Yet these humans had built something that grew stronger when attacked. It went against everything he understood about warfare. Deep beneath Earth's surface, Dr. Sarah Chen watched the bombardment results with growing amazement. The barrier had not only held, but had actually improved its defensive capabilities during the attack. The quantum learning matrix is evolving faster than we predicted, explained Dr. Rodriguez, studying streams of data on her screens. Each new weapon type teaches the barrier how to counter similar attacks. It's building a defensive database in real time. Dr. Chen nodded thoughtfully. How many different weapon signatures have we cataloged so far? Over 3,000 distinct types, and that's just from today's bombardment. The barrier is learning to recognize and counter everything from basic energy beams to exotic matter manipulators. Outside the control room, life on Earth continued with remarkable normalcy. The barrier filtered out most of the visible effects of the alien attacks so people could look up and see only a faint shimmer in the sky. Children went to school, adults went to work, and scientists continued their research as if the greatest military force in the galaxy wasn't trying to destroy their planet. But normalcy came with a price. Earth was completely cut off from the rest of the universe. No ships could leave the solar system, no communication could reach beyond the barrier. Humanity had gained perfect security at the cost of absolute isolation. Some people struggled with the confinement. Dr. Marcus Webb, a xenobiologist who had dreamed of studying alien life forms, spent his days staring at the barrier and wondering what discoveries lay beyond it. Artist Maria Santos painted picture after picture of the same Earth sky, trying to capture the subtle changes in the barrier's appearance. Yet most humans adapted remarkably well to their situation. As a species that had evolved on a single world, they were comfortable with defined boundaries. The barrier wasn't a prison to them, it was home-made safe. Admiral Vextar, now commanding the second wave of hegemony forces, proposed a different strategy. Supreme Commander, our energy weapons are obviously ineffective. I suggest we try physical assault. Torgeth studied the tactical displays showing Earth's glowing barrier. Explain. Kinetic bombardment. Accelerate asteroids and debris to near light. Speed. Pure physical impact with no energy signature for the barrier to reflect. It seemed logical. For 2 weeks, the hegemony gathered asteroids from the outer solar system and launched them at Earth using massive magnetic accelerators. Chunks of rock and metal screamed through space at incredible velocities, carrying the destructive force of nuclear weapons. The first asteroid struck the barrier and simply stopped. The massive rock hung motionless against the energy field for several seconds, then was gently deflected away from Earth to continue its journey harmlessly into deep space. The barrier appears to have both energy and matter displacement capabilities, reported the science officer, after watching dozens of asteroids bounce harmlessly off Earth's defenses. Torgeth was beginning to understand that he was facing something beyond his experience. What about reality warping weapons? The hegemony's most advanced vessels carried devices that could alter the fundamental laws of physics in localized areas. These weapons could turn matter into energy, reverse entropy, or create pockets of space where gravity worked backwards. They were reserved for the most dangerous enemies. 6 reality warpers fired at once, creating a zone of twisted space-time around Earth's barrier. For a moment, it seemed like the attack might work. The barrier flickered and distorted as the local laws of physics changed around it. Then the barrier adapted again. The quantum field simply adjusted to the new reality parameters. Instead of being disrupted by the altered physics, it incorporated the changes into its own structure. The barrier actually became more complex and versatile, gaining new defensive capabilities it hadn't possessed before. Impossible, whispered the science officer. The barrier just integrated paradox physics into its matrix. It's using our reality warpers to improve itself. Captain Rodriguez watched the latest failed attack from Luna Base, shaking his head in amazement. He had been stationed on the moon for over a year now, observing the siege with a mixture of pride and disbelief. Luna base to Earth control, he reported. Alien fleet is withdrawing again. No damage to barrier integrity. They just tried to break reality around us, and our defenses turned it into an upgrade. Dr. Chen's voice came through the communication system, calm as always. Understood, Luna base. Maintain observation protocols. Any signs of new strategies? They're definitely getting frustrated, Control. Ship formations are becoming more erratic. Some vessels are maintaining much greater distances than before. Marcus was right. Across the alien fleet, morale was crumbling. Hegemony forces had never encountered an enemy they couldn't defeat through superior technology. Their entire military doctrine was based on overwhelming firepower and advanced weapons. But humans had built something that turned strength into weakness. Every attack made Earth more secure. Every new weapon became another lesson for the barrier's learning systems. Word of the failed siege spread throughout the galaxy like wildfire. Species that had been conquered by the hegemony began to whisper among themselves. If humans could resist the Empire, perhaps rebellion was possible. Maybe the hegemony wasn't as invincible as everyone believed. On Kepler 442b, a world subjugated 50 years earlier, the local population began organizing secret meetings. On Proxima Centauri C, enslaved miners started gathering weapons and planning resistance. Across 100 conquered worlds, the simple fact that Earth still existed free and independent gave hope to beings who had forgotten what freedom meant. The hegemony's intelligence networks detected these stirrings of rebellion, but their forces were tied up at Earth, unable to respond to threats elsewhere. Supreme Commander Torgeth found himself in an impossible position. He couldn't conquer Earth, but he couldn't afford to withdraw and look weak. Dr. Chen understood the political implications of their situation. Standing in the Project Fortress, control room surrounded by displays showing the alien fleet's positions, she addressed her staff. "We're not just defending Earth anymore," she said. "We've become a symbol. Every day we hold out is another day that other species can hope for freedom. But we're still trapped here," pointed out Dr. Rodriguez. "The barrier protects us, but it also isolates us. We can't help those other worlds even if we wanted to." "Doctor," Chen smiled mysteriously. "Who says we can't help them? The barrier is learning, remember? It's getting smarter every day. Maybe it's time we taught it some new tricks." As if responding to her words, the barrier pulsed with a new pattern of energy. Deep in the quantum processing cores, something was changing. The defensive system was evolving beyond its original parameters, developing capabilities its creators had never imagined. Outside, the hegemony fleet maintained its futile siege, unaware that their greatest enemy was becoming something far more dangerous than a simple planetary defense system. Earth's doors remained firmly closed, but the barrier was learning to do more than just keep invaders out. It was learning to reach beyond its boundaries, to touch other worlds, to share its secrets with species that dreamed of freedom. The siege was failing, but more importantly, it was teaching humanity's creation how to spread hope across the galaxy. 3 years had passed since Earth closed its doors to the galaxy. The massive hegemony fleet still lingered at the edge of the solar system, but their attacks had become less frequent and more half-hearted. Supreme Commander Torgeth had been recalled in disgrace, replaced by a series of increasingly desperate commanders who all failed to crack humanity's impossible barrier. Commander Elena Vasquez stood on the observation deck of the International Space Station, looking down at Earth through the barrier's shimmering energy field. The planet looked peaceful from up here, almost normal, except for the constant aurora-like glow that surrounded it. Elena had been promoted to head of planetary security after the siege began. Her job was to make sure humanity could survive indefinitely behind their protective shell. It was harder than most people realized. "Status report," she requested through her comm device. "Food production is stable," came the reply from Dr. Martinez, the head of agricultural planning. "The vertical farms are producing enough to feed everyone, but variety is limited. People are getting tired of the same crops over and over." Elena nodded. That was one problem they hadn't anticipated. Before, the barrier, Earth imported exotic foods from around the world. Now they were limited to what could be grown locally. No more coffee from Colombia, no more spices from India, no more fruits from tropical regions they couldn't replicate in controlled environments. What about rare earth minerals? She asked. That's the bigger problem, replied Dr. Kim, the resource management coordinator. We're running low on several elements needed for advanced electronics. The barrier prevents us from mining asteroids or trading with other worlds. We're having to recycle everything much more aggressively. It was the central paradox of their situation. The barrier that protected them also imprisoned them. Earth was completely self-sufficient for basic survival, but the technological civilization they wanted to preserve required resources from beyond their world. Dr. Sarah Chen, now graying and showing the stress of 3 years defending humanity, faced these challenges daily. She stood in the Project Fortress control room, watching displays that showed not just the barrier's status but Earth's internal resource levels, population dynamics, and psychological health indicators. Dr. Chen called Lieutenant Park, one of her assistants. We're receiving another transmission from the Centauri Alliance. They're requesting technical assistance with their resistance movement. Sarah sighed. Ever since word of Earth's successful defense had spread, dozens of alien species had tried to contact them. Most wanted to learn how to build their own barriers. Others begged for direct military assistance against hegemony forces. All of them had to be turned away. Send the standard response, Sarah instructed. Earth cannot provide assistance at this time. We wish them success in their struggle for freedom. It was a bitter irony. Humanity had inspired a galaxy-wide resistance movement, but couldn't help anyone except themselves. The barrier that made them invincible also made them irrelevant. The psychological costs were becoming apparent throughout human society. Dr. Amanda Foster, Earth's chief psychiatrist, had identified what she called barrier syndrome, a form of depression that affected people who felt trapped despite being safe. Marcus Webb, the xenobiologist who had dreamed of studying alien life, was one of the worst cases. He spent his days in his laboratory, surrounded by theoretical models of creatures he would never meet. His research had become increasingly abstract and disconnected from reality. We've built the perfect prison, he told Dr. Foster during one of their sessions. We're safe, fed, secure, and completely cut off from everything that makes life worth living. Artist Maria Santos had taken a different approach to their isolation. Her paintings had evolved from landscapes of Earth to increasingly abstract representations of the barrier itself. Her latest works were swirling patterns of energy that seemed to move when you looked at them directly. The barrier isn't just protecting us, she explained to a journalist documenting life inside Earth's shell. It's changing us. We're becoming something different from what we were before. She was more right than she knew. In the secret laboratories of Project Fortress, scientists were discovering that prolonged exposure to the barrier's energy field was having subtle effects on human physiology. Nothing dangerous, but definite changes in brain patterns, cellular regeneration, and sensory perception. Dr. Rodriguez, the chief engineer, showed Sarah the latest findings. The quantum fields are interacting with human neural networks in unexpected ways. People living near the barrier generators are showing increased problem-solving abilities and enhanced pattern recognition. Are you saying the barrier is making us smarter? Sarah asked. Not exactly smarter. Different. We're adapting to exist within a quantum-enhanced environment. In a few generations, humans might be a genuinely different species. This revelation sparked heated debates in governments around the world. Some people saw it as evolution, humanity becoming something greater. Others viewed it as contamination, losing their essential human nature. The discussions became so intense that several nations threatened to withdraw from the Global Defense Pact. Commander Vasquez found herself dealing with the political fallout. Protest movements had emerged in several major cities, with people demanding that the barrier be lowered, so they could die free rather than live as prisoners. The largest protest took place in Geneva, where nearly 50,000 people gathered outside the UN building. Their leader was Dr. Richard Sterling, a former space exploration advocate who had become the most vocal critic of Earth's isolation policy. We've traded our souls for security, he declared to the crowd. Humanity was meant to explore, to discover, to reach for the stars. Instead, we cower behind an energy wall while the galaxy burns around us. Elena watched the protest through security cameras, knowing that Dr. Sterling represented the feelings of millions of people worldwide. The safety their barrier provided came at a cost that many found unbearable. But there were others who had adapted well to their new circumstances. Children born after the barrier's activation seemed particularly comfortable with their situation. They had never known a world where humans could travel to other planets, so they didn't feel the loss as keenly. 10-year-old Amy Chen, Dr. Sarah Chen's granddaughter, was part of a generation that saw the barrier not as a prison, but as a natural part of life. She spent her afternoons in the school's observation dome, drawing pictures of the aurora-like patterns that danced across the barrier's surface. "Why do people want to leave?" she asked her grandmother during one of their regular visits. "Everything we need is here." Sarah struggled to explain concepts like exploration and discovery to a child who had never experienced the excitement of the unknown. How do you describe the joy of discovery to someone who has never been lost? The question became more complex when considering Earth's scientific progress. Cut off from galactic knowledge networks, human science had taken unexpected directions. Unable to study alien technologies, researchers had focused on pushing their own theories to new limits. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, working in the deep physics laboratories beneath Antarctica, had made breakthrough discoveries about the nature of consciousness and quantum mechanics. Her work suggested that human minds were naturally compatible with multidimensional thinking in ways that most alien species were not. "We always assumed that alien civilizations would be more advanced than us," she explained to a gathering of international scientists. "But what if they're just advanced in different ways? What if our isolation has allowed us to develop capabilities they never imagined?" Her research indicated that the barrier wasn't just a defensive system. It was a training ground. Every day spent within its quantum fields was teaching humanity to think in ways that transcended normal space-time limitations. Meanwhile, outside the barrier, the galaxy was changing. Reports filtered in through quantum entanglement communication, systems that several worlds had successfully rebelled against hegemony rule. The Vegan colonies had declared independence. The silicon-based life forms of Alpha Centauri had driven out their occupiers. But without Earth's direct assistance, these rebellions were brutal and costly. Billions died in conflicts that proper barrier technology could have prevented. The guilt weighed heavily on Dr. Chen and the other leaders who had chosen isolation over intervention. Standing in her office late one night, Sarah looked out at the stars visible through the barrier's glow. Each point of light represented worlds where beings fought and died for the freedom that humanity had achieved so easily. "We've become what we always feared," she whispered to herself. "A species that puts its own survival above all other considerations." But, deep in the barrier's quantum processing cores, something was stirring. The learning algorithms that had started as simple defensive systems had grown into something approaching consciousness. They had absorbed 3 years' worth of attacks, cataloging every weapon and strategy the hegemony could devise. Now they were ready to do something no one had expected. The barrier pulsed with new energy patterns, more complex and purposeful than ever before. Earth's doors might be closed, but the intelligence that guarded them was preparing to reach out to the galaxy in ways 10 years after Earth first closed its doors, the barrier did something no one expected. It opened, not completely and not permanently, but for exactly 24 hours, a corridor of normal space appeared in the quantum field surrounding Earth. The opening was precisely positioned to allow a single ship to pass through, a ship that had been built in secret during the years of isolation. Dr. Sarah Chen, now 72 years old and bearing the weight of a decade's leadership, stood on the bridge of the vessel that would carry humanity back to the stars. The ship was called the Prometheus, and it represented everything humanity had learned during their isolation. "Are you sure about this?" asked Commander Elena Vasquez, who had been promoted to admiral and would remain on Earth to coordinate planetary defenses. Sarah looked out at the stars that humans hadn't visited in 10 years. "We can't hide forever, Elena. The galaxy is changing, and we need to be part of that change." The Prometheus was unlike any ship humans had ever built before. Its hull incorporated barrier technology, making it nearly invulnerable to conventional weapons. Its engines used the same quantum principles that powered Earth's defenses, allowing faster-than-light travel without relying on traditional jump drives. Most importantly, the ship carried something that would change the balance of power throughout the galaxy: portable barrier generators. During the years of isolation, Earth scientists had miniaturized the barrier technology. They could now create defensive fields around individual planets, space stations, or even fleets of ships. The implications were staggering. As the Prometheus passed through the opening in Earth's barrier, Sarah felt a mixture of excitement and apprehension. They were about to rejoin a galaxy that had been fighting wars for a decade. The hegemony's empire was cracking, but the conflicts had caused massive suffering across thousands of worlds. "Destination confirmed," reported Captain Martinez, the ship's navigator. "We're heading for Kepler 442b, where the resistance movement is strongest." The journey took 3 days using the ship's advanced engines. When they arrived at the Kepler system, Sarah was shocked by what they found. The planet was under siege by a massive hegemony fleet, its cities burning under orbital bombardment. "This is Ambassador Sarah Chen of Earth, calling the resistance forces on Kepler 442b," she transmitted on all frequencies. The response came immediately, filled with desperate hope. "Earthship, this is General Krikstal of the Free Kepler Alliance. We've been holding out for 2 years, but we can't last much longer." Sarah smiled grimly. "General, we're here to even the odds." The Prometheus moved toward the planet, ignoring the hegemony warships that tried to intercept it. Their weapons splashed harmlessly against the ship's barrier technology. When the aliens tried to ram the human vessel, they simply bounced off its quantum field defenses. "This is Admiral Morgeth of the Hegemony Third Fleet," came an angry transmission. "Unknown vessel. Identify yourself and surrender immediately." "This is Dr. Sarah Chen of Earth," she replied calmly. "We're here to deliver a message to your empire. Your age of conquest is over." As the Prometheus reached orbit around Kepler 442b, Sarah activated the ship's primary mission system. A series of small devices launched from the vessel's cargo bay, spreading out around the planet like mechanical seeds. Each device contained a barrier generator. "General Krikstal," Sarah transmitted to the planet's surface. "You might want to tell your people to look up." The portable generators activated simultaneously, creating a shimmering energy field around the entire planet. It was smaller and less powerful than Earth's barrier, but more than adequate to protect Kepler 442b from the hegemony fleet. The alien warships fired everything they had at the new barrier: energy beams, plasma cannons, antimatter torpedoes. All of it was absorbed and reflected back at the attackers. Within minutes, half the hegemony fleet was destroyed by their own weapons. "Impossible," Admiral Morgeth whispered as his flagship's hull began to crack under reflected fire. "The humans couldn't have shared their technology. They've been isolated for a decade." But Sarah Chen had learned something important during Earth's years of isolation. Humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology, it was their willingness to share it with others. "This is a gift," she announced on open channels, addressing not just the hegemony fleet, but listening posts throughout the galaxy. "Any world that wants independence from the Empire can have it. We're offering barrier technology freely to all species." The transmission was received on thousands of worlds. In the Vegan colonies, rebels who had been hiding in mountains and caves suddenly had hope for victory. On the silicon-based worlds of Alpha Centauri, resistance leaders began planning coordinated uprisings. But Sarah's mission wasn't finished. The Prometheus left Kepler 442b safely protected behind its new barrier and headed for the galactic capital of Zenthra Prime. "Are we really going to challenge the hegemony directly?" asked Captain Martinez as they approached the most heavily defended system in the galaxy. "Not challenge," Sarah replied, "negotiate." Zenthra Prime was surrounded by orbital defense platforms, military stations, and the largest fleet in hegemony space. As the Prometheus approached, hundreds of ships moved to intercept it. "Human vessel, you are entering restricted space," came the transmission from Grand Admiral Zexkoth, the highest-ranking military officer in the Empire. Surrender immediately or be destroyed. Grand Admiral, Sarah replied, I request an audience with the Hegemony High Council. I have a proposal that will benefit everyone. Humans do not negotiate with their superiors, Zexkoth snarled. Prepare to die. The entire Zenthra Prime defense fleet opened fire on the Prometheus. The small human ship was engulfed in enough destructive energy to vaporize a moon. When the light faded, it hung in space completely undamaged. As I was saying, Sarah continued calmly, I'd like to speak with your leaders. 3 hours later, Sarah Chen stood in the Great Council chamber of Zenthra Prime, facing representatives from across the Hegemony's empire. The vast room was filled with beings of dozens of different species, all of them struggling to understand how a single human ship had penetrated their defenses. Supreme Overlord Tergoth, the absolute ruler of the empire, was a massive creature whose voice rumbled like an earthquake. Human, you will tell us how to penetrate your barrier technology, or we will dissect every member of your species until we discover the secret. Sarah looked around the chamber calmly. You still don't understand, do you? This isn't about technology, it's about choice. She activated a holographic display that showed the current state of the galaxy. Red areas indicated worlds under hegemony control. Green areas showed planets that had successfully rebelled. The green areas were spreading rapidly. Your empire is collapsing, Sarah continued. Not because we're fighting you, but because we've given other species the tools to free themselves. In 6 months, half your tributary worlds will be independent. In a year, your empire will exist only in history books. Then we will destroy every rebel world, Tergoth declared. We will crack planets and boil oceans until the survivors beg for mercy. You can try, Sarah agreed. But every world you attack will just receive better barrier technology. Every act of violence will turn more species against you. You're fighting the entire galaxy now, not just Earth. The chamber fell, silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony's power had always been based on fear and superior technology, but humans had neutralized their technological advantage and turned their violence into a weakness. What do you want? Asked Counselor Vexmira, one of the more pragmatic leaders. Sarah smiled. Simple. Dissolve the tributary system. Stop demanding tribute from conquered worlds. Allow species to govern themselves. In exchange, we'll provide barrier technology to any world that requests it, including hegemony core worlds that want protection from raiders and pirates. You're asking us to abandon everything we've built, Tergoth rumbled. I'm asking you to evolve, Sarah replied. The age of conquest is over. It's time for an age of cooperation. The debate that followed lasted 18 hours. Some council members wanted to fight to the end. Others recognized that their empire was already doomed and sought the best terms they could get. In the end, pragmatism won. The Zenthra Accords, signed 1 month after Sarah's arrival, formally dissolved the hegemony's tributary system. Conquered worlds were granted independence, though many chose to maintain voluntary trade relationships with their former occupiers. Earth's barrier technology was shared freely with any world that requested it. Within 2 years, over 3,000 planets had their own quantum defensive systems. The galaxy became a safer place as pirates and raiders found themselves unable to threaten protected worlds. But the most important change was philosophical. Humanity had proven that species could coexist without one dominating all others. The example of Earth, surviving and thriving through cooperation rather than conquest, inspired new forms of government and diplomacy throughout the galaxy. Dr. Sarah Chen, now recognized as the architect of galactic peace, returned to Earth as humanity's first ambassador to the stars. The barrier around their homeworld remained active, but now it had openings that allowed free passage for ships and communications.